Welcome! Today I would like to talk about my game against the French International Master and Woman Grandmaster Sophie Milliet. The game was played as part of the match between my team of Open against Wachtebeke. Our team very narrowly won a very tense match against one of our main competitors for the league title. So let me show you our game. I was playing with the white pieces and I opened up the game as usual with my move knight to f3, and she answered my opening with the Semi-Slav/Maran, which happens after e6 and c6. In this position, I recently had played bishop to g5 against Vincent Keimer, and I decided to mix things up a little bit. I played the move e3, and after knight bd7, I also didn't play my other normal pet line, namely the move bishop to d3, but instead I went for the move queen to c2. My main goal was to get her out of the theory a little bit, because I was not necessarily preparing for her that much. I was expecting some other players as my opponents more than her, and I think she might have expected me as an opponent. So I didn't really want to go for a theoretical battle here. She played bishop to d6, and after b3 castles, I went for bishop to e2. Black has two moves in this position. One is to directly try to open up things with e5, and the other one is to go for a very complex middle game with the move b6, and that's what she chose in the game. She was still playing rather quickly, so I think this was all kind of known to her. And after bishop to b2, she played the move rook to c8. And here I was already thinking, I know that I had analyzed this position or similar positions in the past, but it's already a while and I was not sure in which position you are supposed to play e4. And then I vaguely remembered that rook a to d1 should be played first. There are also other options, so you can basically put these two rooks on any two of the squares in the middle. But apparently rook a to d1 is also what the theory gives as a good option for white. She went for queen to e7. And here I thought, okay, maybe she still knows the theory, and I'm not really willing to go for a theoretical battle, which might occur after e4, because she was still playing relatively quickly. Yeah, indeed, the database gives e4 as the most popular move. And then something like takes, queen takes, maybe something like black plays, maybe even now or one move later, knight f6 and c5, and yeah, the position is still theoretical and remains quite complex. So instead, I went for the move rook fe1 with the idea of waiting what she does. If she goes e5, maybe I can just take c takes d. And I was expecting that she might go for something like rook fd8, and maybe now I could even play more waiting moves like h3 and queen b1, and then to just get her out of theory and get a complicated middle game. Instead, she came with the move c5. This move, to be frank, surprised me quite a bit, and I also did not anticipate her idea at all. So maybe here I should go d takes c. But yeah, I didn't see her idea at all, so I just went c takes d, which I think is the more natural move. The point being, if she takes back with a pawn, I have this nice structure against the two hanging pawns in the middle. And if she takes back with a knight, then she always has this slight issue with this bishop. So let's say knight takes, bishop takes. I can go e4 at some point, and this should also be a bit better for white. Instead, she went with the move c to d4. Big surprise for me, and I really had to start regrouping myself here because I completely missed that move. And then I started to calculate, and I was basically calculating d takes e for quite some time. And I thought after dc, ed, knight d7, I can probably not take on c3 in a very nice way, because this pin is quite unpleasant, and so for that reason I rejected the line. Turns out that after de, the computer even gives d takes e3, and black is already quite a bit better, because after this move you can take on f2. Yeah, amazing. After king f2, just knight g4, and now queen e3 and queen f2 is mating. In any case, even this DE DC is, I think, decent for black, so yeah, it was correct that I rejected that, but I went for rook to d4 instead. She played knight d5. Luckily, I can still now get out of this pin by just taking on d5, bishop d5, and queen to b1. Now she started thinking for a long time, and I was hoping that she would not go for the move knight to e5, but in the end, after a long think, she played knight e5, unfortunately. And I think after knight e5, it's very clear that black has solved the opening problems completely. And if anything, probably already black might be slightly better, or at least it's very comfortably equal. I never really want to play e4. That's the first thing to notice about the position, because then later on this diagonal becomes horribly weak and f2 is kind of unprotected. So she could just go back. But then I don't really have time for something like knight e2. This is just too slow. So then I basically have to take now on e5. And she takes back with the bishop. Yeah, and it's very obvious that black is comfortably equal, if not already slightly better here. And at this point, I was thinking to myself, do I want to go rook to d2 and give her the option of either playing something like bishop d6, when probably black is still slightly better, or going for something like bishop b2, queen b2, and maybe h6, after which the chances of me winning the game are very, very limited? Or do I want to gamble a little bit and go for a move which I knew was objectively probably not the best? And yeah, I decided for the latter, given that I'm rated above 100 points higher, and that some of the others in the match were rated lower than their opponents. I thought, okay, it's a team match, so I definitely should push. But it's clear that yeah, this rook on a4 is kind of awkward, and it's quite risky to play this. She took on b2. I took back, and she played the move e5. I think this is also pretty strong. One point is to close this diagonal forever, such that I never have this rook g4 swings. The second point is that she might get a nice spot for the bishop at some point. And the third point is she might even swing the rook over to g6 herself. So enough arrows for now. I went for the move rook d1, realizing probably, if anything, she's already slightly better. Rook fd8. And now, since both times were slowly ticking down, I was thinking, okay, I don't want to go for h3. I want to go for a very tricky move, the move queen to a3. And I initially thought this move is quite strong. It turns out it does not really work. But yeah, what was my plan? My plan was basically, if she takes, I can take back. And now, surprisingly, this pin is quite unpleasant. So she cannot move the bishop, because then I would just take and take on a7. And if she goes something like rook c2, I also have any bishop move that makes use of the pin. And if she goes a5 here, I have this very strong move b4. Again, threatening to make use of the pin and at least probably winning a pawn. So for that reason, after queen a3, I thought, okay, this pin is quite unpleasant and I probably win the pawn on a7. But yeah, it's just too optimistic. I mean, it's clear that black's pieces are much more harmonious than my two strange pieces here on the rim. And she played the move queen to f6, which is very strong. And which shows that the whole concept that I set up here does not really work tactically. I started thinking and thought for quite some time. It was only move 21, but we were both already pretty low on time. I was thinking about rook a7 and then rook c2. And here I was mainly considering the move rook to e1. during the game I thought, okay, she can probably play bishop g2, takes, and then just takes on e2, takes, and queen g6, which should be at least a perpetual. Probably it's even more for her because this rook is somehow hanging, and computer even gives this as advantage black after some line like this. And now queen e4 check, very sneaky move, and after long line, black has an advantage according to the computer, so something like this and this. Very strange moves for a human to calculate so far, but to me it was clear that she has at least a perpetual, so I did not want to go for that. And it turns out that even in the position after rook e1, she has several stronger moves, like queen to g6, or even stronger bishop to e4, which I completely missed, just threatening bishop to e3 and making use of this unprotected pawn on f2, and after bishop e4 I can basically resign. While I did not see this, at least my spidey senses were kind of on, and I realized allowing her to go rook c2 is way too dangerous, and I went for the move queen to b2 instead. Here the computer gives the move b5, sacrificing both of these pawns at the same time. And then just wants to play for counterplay next move with queen to g6, but this is not very human, so I'm not going to analyze this too deeply. Instead, she played the very logical move a5, which is also one of the moves that I was expecting. And I went now even more all in with the move f4. I think h3 is probably objectively a little bit more sound, but even there I think white is already fighting for equality, so I was not really willing to do that, but instead I wanted to complicate things as much as possible in time trouble, hoping to somehow trick her later on. So what is the point of f4? Well, there are several points. The first point is if she goes ef, I can just take, and in this concrete position probably even go rook a4. But in general, even if I just take back here, it's clear that white has solved all problems. So taking is not really an option for black. The other thing is, with f4, I prepare to protect the g2 pawn with the queen. So that's what we're going to see in the game. So that's what we see now. So she played queen to g6, attacking g2. And luckily now I have this move bishop to d3. Yeah, and now it seems like white is actually hanging on. I was really afraid during the game that I missed something tactically here, but it all kind of works. So the first thing is to consider that bishop takes b3, with the idea of meeting bishop g6 with rook d1, that this is just met by queen takes b3, and then I'm just a piece up. The next thing to consider is that bishop to e4, with the idea of using this pin, runs into takes, and I can now just take back. And after queen e4, I was calculating during the game that I have queen to d2, which is fine, but I might even have some tricks like queen c2 here, threatening rook d8. After which the computer again gives some crazy line which ends in a draw. Queen takes e3 check, takes, g6, and the game is going to peter out to a draw. And thus, the computer now gives as the best move for black the move f5. Absolutely amazing, and to be honest, it didn't cross my mind at all. With a crazy idea, namely if I just take on e5, she has bishop takes g2. Absolutely stunning. I take back, and now rook takes d3. Yeah, I mean, I think if you see it, you realize how strong this is, because I can't take on g6 because of check, and I can't take on d3 because of rook c1, rook c2, winning a queen. But yeah, I mean, if you play f5, you really have to see this, that fe is not working. And now the computer gives some ridiculous move, the move h3 to create luft for the king in the lines after bishop takes g2, and then black cannot really take on g2, but still keeps some attack, and the position is still better for black. But okay, in the time trouble, she did not play f5, and I would definitely also not have played f5 with black, so this is very understandable. Instead, she played the move queen to g4. But now at least I can trade down. So I get rid of the queen. She's basically forced to take. And we end up in an endgame, which should be objectively still relatively close to equal. So one line would be, for instance, f6. Now if I want, I can take on d5 and play bishop c4. Black has to give back the rook, and the endgame would result in a draw. Or, as she did in the game, just play the move bishop to c6. But probably f6 is a little bit more precise, because it kind of forces a draw from black's point of view. And after bishop c6, I thought, okay, I get rook to c4. So maybe, especially since she's in big time trouble at this point, maybe I can somehow get the upper hand. And indeed, it worked out. So what she should have done would be to take on d1. That's what happened still in the game, and now to go for the move rook to d8. I think during the game we both thought this was not the best idea because I can take. Check and king f2, and I have this one, 3 threads at the same time. But maybe it's not so bad actually for black. So go for something like king to f8, and we get some endgame where black is a pawn down, but probably able to save without too many problems. But of course, it's not necessarily what you would have expected if you move the go for black. Instead, she understandably chose to go for this bishop to d7, probably thinking that if I take on c8 and I take on e5, she will maybe get the pawn e5 somehow, but she doesn't. And here we now start with a very, very interesting bishop endgame. The first thing that is interesting, I might seriously consider to take with the f-pawn, because as we will see later, what I want to do in the bishop endgame is to exchange these two pawns against one another, such that I get some play against the remaining pawn on a5. Of course, this is all still far in the future, and I didn't really think about it carefully in the game. And instead decided to just take on c8 and now go f takes e. What I had calculated is that the endgame is not so easy for her. So the point is, if she tries to go to e6, I still have bishop to g4 check. So even though if we just do pure counting, one move slower, she will not be able to capture the pawn. So this is of course very important. So let's see. She went for king f8, and now just king to e7. Yeah, and here I made a pretty serious mistake or inaccuracy. I should have gone for the move bishop to e2, bringing the bishop to c4, and avoiding any counterplay that she might get after what I did in the game. Instead, I went with the move e4, and I was quite proud in time trouble that I played this nice e4. Now I will get my king to d4, and things are great. But maybe you can think about it for a moment and then try to find a very, very strong move for black here. All right, maybe you have found it. It's of course much easier if I give you the hint that there is a strong move here than if you only have 30 seconds increment. And the move is f6. Kind of an amazing and very, very instructive resource. The point is, if I take, she can just take back, and she now gets her king to e5 and can just attack the pawn, and I have 0 ways of making progress. Yeah, absolutely amazing. If you see the position, it's directly understandable, it's shake hands. But of course, from afar, it's not so obvious. So she missed this great strategic shot of playing f6, allowing me to get rid of doubled pawns, but really activating this king to the maximum. Instead, she went for the much weaker bishop to b7. To be honest, during the game I also didn't see f6 at all. King e3, and now I get my king to d4. And we're basically back in a type of position that I could have gotten anyway by playing bishop e4 one move earlier and bishop to c4. She went h6. And now I get this nice position with the king in the center. And in this type of position, it would actually be nice to have this pawn now on c4 and to go for c5 in some positions. Because what I want to do here strategically is to exchange this pawn against this pawn and then eventually to capture the a pawn. And that's, of course, much easier if I have a pawn on the c file than if I have the pawn on the b file. Okay, she played some waiting moves. All black can do here is to wait anyways. King e6, check, king e7. And yeah, I make some useful moves. g3, get one more pawn on the dark squares, not allowing her to eventually take on g2. Bishop e7, bishop d5. And yeah, this is the next position in which you can pause the video and you can think about finding a good plan for white. Well, I think what I did in the game is kind of reasonable. Namely, I went for king to c3. As I said before, I would like to get rid of this pawn, ideally against this pawn. Of course, I cannot really force this, but if I go a3, b4, I think I have no way to get in with my king. So I would really like to take back with the king at least, to have much more space for the king and potentially invade via b5. King to c3. Here she cannot go f6, because in this case I would just go back. And then it's a completely different story. Next move I take and then I go e5. So that's not possible. So what should she have done here? And that's, I think, a very hard sequence to spot. Is to go bishop to b5 according to the computer. With the following idea, if I take, now to go bishop to e8. And now if I do something similar, a little bit careless like I did in the game, and go a3, so maybe I can still continue with something like this. But if I go a3 now, the main idea is to go f6 again. And for similar reasons like before, I do not really want to allow her that. Yeah? So if she plays f6, ideally I would like to have the king on d4. And yeah, the position is definitely still not easy to win. Instead, she went for bishop to c8, which is probably the losing mistake. And now after b4, takes, I have an ideal position of the king. She cannot go f6 here because then I can just run. Bishop d7, and now just bishop b3, preparing bishop a4, creating the entry square for the king. And now this kind of counterplay with f6 is too slow. Yeah, I can just take and it's too slow. So she went king to f8. In some cases basically also played just e6, but okay. King f8. And what I now want is to get the king to d5. I create some space. Of course, all of these pawn endings, they are completely lost. So if she goes king e7, I can just take and go king b5. Run here, and eventually I run over to the other wing more quickly than my opponent. So she went for bishop to g4. And now just bishop to c6 seals the deal, because yeah, I can't go king b5 immediately because of this check. So I play bishop to c6 to cut her off this diagonal, forcing her to defend with bishop to e2. And now I can again ask you to pause the video and to find the winning sequence for white. Yeah, maybe you found it. It's the move bishop to d5, now allowing me to go bishop c4 next and then to enter with the king. because now after bishop a6, she cannot go here. Now this diagonal is too short, and she cannot give a check from that side because there are no more squares at the corner of the board. So for that reason, after bishop d5, the game is over. I will play bishop c4 next. She continued for a few moves, but yeah, it's completely hopeless. Bishop c4 takes, king b5. Now b6 is falling. She has zero counterplay. I mean, all of these squares are controlled. She eventually went for f5, but yeah, it's just way too slow. I take. And there's nothing you can do to stop this a pawn from queening. Yeah, if she somehow goes back, I can always also trade down to a winning pawn endgame. So she went for this. And after takes, she resigned because bishop a6, bishop b7 is coming. And then I'll get a new queen. Well, this was a very, very complicated middle game. And I think I was risking quite a lot by playing this rook a4 and queen a3 and later on f4. But I'm happy to see that this gamble paid off. She played it, I think, really well until the end game. She definitely had some chances of even getting a better position in the late middle game. Most of all with this amazing move f5, which I also didn't see. And then we got this very instructive bishop endgame where we both missed that black could go for f6, allowing me to get rid of my double pawns, but really activating the king to the fullest by bringing the king to e5. And I think afterwards I played it quite well. I converted this extra pawn. I found this nice motive king c3 and then b4 because I need to create entry squares for the king. Yeah, and in the end, once I win the b6 pawn, it's just completely over. So I hope you enjoyed the game, and thanks a lot for watching. See you next time.